Joining us now is Tim Kirby from Moscow to give us his insights on the recent developments in Moscow and, of course, the war in Ukraine. Tim, what's your opinion, and how will this non-stop feeding of arms into Ukraine affect the future of the war?
Well, the only thing that it's really done is it's allowed the war to continue. Some people argue that NATO support has sort of changed the dynamic of things. The only thing it does is essentially give the Ukrainians a lot more resources than they would have had, because for the most part, if we were to watch videos from earlier this year compared to videos now of Ukrainian machinery being destroyed, the percentage of that machinery that's essentially Soviet gets slimmer and slimmer and slimmer as time goes on. And much of that, which is still Soviet, actually comes from the sort of eastern side of NATO, as we could call it. So essentially, if it weren't for NATO support, the Ukrainians would have just simply run out of machinery for the most part by now. But will it be able to change the war, defeat the Russians, or make some sort of real dynamic change? It doesn't seem to be so, because even with the HIMARS, which are able to commit effective acts of terrorism against locals, they certainly haven't stopped the Russian forces.
Tim, Ukraine is asking NATO to accelerate its membership process. How likely is the possibility of a fast-track accession for Ukraine? And do you believe it will escalate the conflict given Russia's opposition to NATO's eastward expansion?
Well, considering the White House and NATO themselves have said that that's not going to happen, it looks like that isn't going to happen. Of course, they have the right to change their mind every 5 minutes on that issue. But for now, they've said no. Also, NATO membership, I do believe, requires the approval of every current member, which means it'll be very difficult to get certain parties to vote for that. So it looks as though they are going to keep things the way they are, because if NATO were to then if Ukraine were to then join NATO, it makes things much more complicated, because then it sort of de facto puts NATO in a war against Russia, which starts World War III, which could kill us all. So that move would seem to be unwise for most people, even people who are not particularly known for their wisdom, like Joe Biden.
Definitely interesting to see how things would plan out in the near future. Tim Kirby there, radio host and political analyst, joining us out of Moscow. Thank you very much for sharing your insights.